Thank you. Good afternoon, and first of all, thank you to Optus. For those of you who don't know, Cisco always tries to go to market through our partners, and Optus in Australia is one of our most important partners, so thank you, Optus, and thank you to you for the opportunity to present today. You know, I do a lot of the presentations, and when you do lots of presentations, you really need a script that says a whole bunch of things like, what's the objective? And one of the questions I ask is, why would you care about what I'm about to talk about? Why would you care? This time it's really easy, because most of you are from the IT industry, and my question, why should you care, is the answer is very simple. Because your careers and mine are at stake. Your careers and mine are at stake. So that's what I want to share with you. Ed Furash, who's now passed away, he's a banker. Can you lower the volume a little bit? It's getting a lot of echo. Thank you. Banking is essential to a modern economy, but banks are not. Kind of leads back to what Mark was talking about. You know, what business are you in? Very important, and I'll connect the dots. Now, banks have known about digital disruption, transformation, whatever you want to call it, for years. Today, we are logging in online to banks 50 times more than going to a bank. And when we log in, 51% of the time, it's on a mobile phone. So they get it and have got it for a long time. The point is that it's happening in terms of shopping. It's happening in terms of news. Now lock the doors. Because it's happening in terms of IT. Do your customers really need computers, or do they need computing? And for that matter, wouldn't your CEO be asking, why do they need you? Why do they need an ICT department? And it's a very good question. So that's where I want to start, and don't leave the room, because there's some really good news coming. So I'm going to go through some dynamics, talk about transitions, and then pitch to you 6 areas of IT that I think are really important in terms of the future of IT, future role of IT. So the dynamics. Plenty written about that is saying IT is happening around you. Why do we need IT? Shadow IT. Use your credit card. It's much quicker than dealing with the IT department. You can get a whole bunch of services off Amazon, off Google, off some public cloud. So that's out there, and you know, if you're a CEO, you'd be forgiven for asking some pretty hard questions. And if you want to look at the numbers, 61% of IT is being funded by the business, and of that 31% of the actual funding is being done outside of your departments. So you do the sums, and if you believe IDC and Gartner, and there's a $2.7 trillion spend in IT, $650 billion last year is being spent without IT involvement. If you want to dig into that, you'll see which areas of the business are driving that the most, operations and marketing. And if you look at it by vertical, you can see the green is where IT is involved, but look how big the blue is, and it's growing by sector. So clearly, there's a big issue here, and we know that the CEOs get it. That's Gal Kelly. They really understand that IT is now fundamental to their business. Indeed, if you look at IBM's research, and they do this every single year, this is research of the top 500 around the world, and it's outside of IT. And the question is, what are the top external factors that you think are going to impact your business in the next 3 years? Take a look at technology. Last 2 years, number 1. This is outside of IT. So we're seeing this shift from IT as we've known it in the sort of last 3 or 4 decades to OT, to operations technology. That's Jeff Immelt, the CEO of GE, who's instrumenting everything. He's putting intelligence in everything that spins, and we'll get to that in a moment. So, what are the transitions? Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time here because I assume we've got a fairly experienced audience, and you would have heard this from a lot of other vendors and analysts and so on. But these are the top 5, almost beyond debate. Cloud. If you want to put some numbers on the survey that was done last year in terms of the relative order of importance, here they are. 36% say cloud is, the most important thing. In fact, if you dig down, in Australia, by the end of this year, 60% of compute would be done on cloud servers. Mobility, huge, absolutely huge. 3.4% of global GDP, employing over 10.5 million people and rising. Consumerization, we basically have more technology at home than we have at work. And especially the Gen Ys are saying, no, we want it at work as well. Big data, I want to come back to that because I think that's an absolute misnomer. It's not about big data, it's about predictive analytics. It's about what we do with that data to do something smart, and I'll come back to that, and social. Alibaba, which is going to IPO very shortly, will be the largest IPO, I think, ever. Social networking in China. So some major trends, and as you can see, I work for Cisco, predicated on all of us being connected. Not just all of us, but everything being connected, and I'll come back to that. So we don't need an IT department? No, we absolutely need an IT department, but we need an IT department looking forward in terms of what's possible outside of IT. That's the difference. So if you look at some of these surveys, they're saying 86% outside of IT is saying that actually the CIO's role is becoming fundamentally more important going forward. Clayton Christensen, any of you guys have read The Innovator's Dilemma? That's where he became famous, but he's written several books since then. And one of the notions he's put forward most recently is if you understand what the job is, then you can understand how to improve the product. Mark was saying, is he in the home loan business or is he in the business of dreams? So, when we buy a product, we actually don't buy a product because we want that product, whether it's a smartphone or a television. We want it to do something. There's a job to be done. And the secret in this is for you to understand what the job is to be done in your businesses. That's the secret. What's the job to be done going forward? Because banking is essential, but banks are not. Banking is essential, banks are not. Computing is essential, computers are not. What's the job to be done? What's the outcome? What's the end game? I'm going to talk about these 6 things, some a bit faster than others. But this is where I think ICT leadership needs to lean towards in the next few years. Those 6 points. I'm going to start off, and of course all predicated, I work for Cisco, on being connected. And we are, as you know, getting more and more connected. So let's start off with brokerage. The internet has we know this, radically lowered costs in the supply chain. And I'm not talking about in the ICT industry. I'm talking about in the world. It's radically lowered costs. So we know that, and we know too that one of the key components of lowering those costs is cloud. We can now do stuff that we couldn't have done in the past, and we can do it with a credit card. So what's happened, we've already passed this sort of transition point. We're all using hybrid clouds. We've got our own data centers, we've got our own private clouds, and we're using public clouds. In fact, our research tells us that most of our customers totally underestimate the clouds and the applications that they're using. Indeed, 50% of the data is not even on their, on their maps. They don't even know where the data is stored, 50%. So it's about hybrid cloud computing. That is a very significant trend. So what does that mean to IT? It's happening. Do you have the right controls, the right governance, the right security, the right cost structure, right? So again, 76% of this research says that IT's new role is as a broker. And I'm going to start off with as a broker of cloud services. So for example, this is where we've been. Customers are currently putting workloads into Azure, into Amazon, into VMware. But as they say, Hotel California, easy to get in, not easy to get out. And as we move to hybrid, that's a problem. Because as we move forward, some clouds are going to be able to do certain things better than others. It's going to be potentially cost, could be risk, could be data sovereignty, could be vertical applications, could be a range of things. And in your organization, you've got to be able to pivot and leverage that. I remember going back a few years when certain organizations would stop people from using YouTube. Boy, was that counterproductive in terms of innovation. We're now in this position where we've got the opportunity to leverage, and it's a buyer's market, leverage cloud. So what we're doing, as we did with the multi-protocol router about 30 years ago, is moving to becoming that hybrid cloud switch, if you will, where we're looking at workloads moving into clouds, taking advantage of whatever the value proposition, and maybe moving it back again. That's the world that we're moving to so that you can take advantage of all these new clouds forming on the right-hand side, moving them in and moving them out. But there's a few tricks to that. So before I talk about the applications, I just want to stop there and say, number one aspect is IT's got a lead in terms of brokering services. And I don't just mean about cloud, and I'll tell you a little story. This was a couple of years ago, sitting down for lunch, 4 CIOs of very large companies. Towards the end of the lunch, I noticed one of the gentlemen hadn't said much. Now, he's the, I guess, CIO of a global multinational, 176,000 employees. I'm telling you this for a reason. I said to him, so what do you think of what's happening and what's your strategy? And I'm summarizing. He said, Kevin, strategy is very simple. In all of our buildings around the world, we're going Wi-Fi. In the data centers, we're going public cloud. And in between, we're going to use the internet. We're dismantling our wide area network. Now, I know I'm in an Optus conference, but I'm not telling Optus anything new. The point is this, the internet reliability has been creeping up to a point that big brands, and I'm talking global brands, are now looking at the internet as their primary backbone network. And in some cases using, fallback onto 4G or whatever. The point I'm making to you is, this is real. Who's looking after this in your organization? Who's thinking about this? And who's thinking about whether this is the way to go or not? And if it is, how are you going to do it? Because it's not like you just connect to the internet. There's a lot involved. Another area of brokerage services is in collaboration. And a lot of people in IT think collaboration is about collaborating within your organization. Wrong. As the famous saying goes, most of the smart people in the world don't work for your company. And tapping into them and your customers is becoming critical. So I'll stop there because I've got to move on to the next point, applications. It's all about the application. Now, I know you know this, but from a technology point of view, it's not been that simple, because in the past, an application ran on a server, and then we virtualized it, so great, we could move the application from one cluster to another, and then all hell has been breaking loose with cloud. So here's what we're doing to address it. But before I do that, I just want to share with you a quick movie. This is taken by one of our own engineers. So for those of you who think our engineers only operate in carpeted areas, this is him, Western Australia. He's sitting on a platform, and he's filming this. You can lower the volume. Yeah. What's happening, those trucks are the size of this room. They carry about 350 tons of iron ore. You'll see that when that truck starts dipping its load, when there's boulders, jackhammers will start kicking in and breaking down the boulders. Sprays come out. And, those wheels are 4 times the height of a man. The point is, there's no human being here, not one human being. And when those tires need to be changed, that truck takes off from the supply chain, goes to a particular bay, the wheel gets changed, replaced, no human being. A couple of days ago, Rio announced its 200 millionth ton using a fleet of about 53 unmanned trucks in Western Australia, no humans involved. Those trucks then tip into trains that take it to the port. No human beings on the trains. This is where we're heading towards. So the point I'm trying to make here is, think of, that has all been run from Perth. There's no human beings because it costs $1 million a year per person, per truck driver, for Rio, BHP, and so on. So what's going on here is those trucks have got a few hundred CPUs and sensors connected via multiple media mechanisms into a data center in Perth that in real time is driving those trucks. Think what happens when that application doesn't work. not only does that truck break down, but the entire pit to port supply chain breaks down to the tune of tens of millions of dollars a day. So we've got to really now think about some special ways of handling that workload. And when you look at how we're doing this, and you look at the costs, this is what we're seeing. Most of the costs are in the operational costs, the human costs of operating these workloads. So what Cisco's been developing in its labs is this thing called application-centric infrastructure, whereby we're now decoupling the workload from the infrastructure and setting policy on that workload. And I'll say we've taken a leaf out of Steve Jobs' books, but we've been doing this in parallel with Apple. We have always felt that it's not just about software, and it's not just about hardware. It's how you bring the two together, like in your iPhone, that really makes a solution work. And you know, Microsoft, for many, many years, were only a software company until they realized only recently that it's not quite as simple as that. This is Steve Ballmer just a few weeks ago. The thing I regret is that we didn't put the hardware and software together soon enough. We get that. We're one of the largest designers of ASICs in the world in our products. So we use our own custom ASICs, and we also use merchant silicon. And tying them together is really important. Why I say that is because, going back to the workload and the criticality of the workload, where we're at. So application-centric infrastructure is about setting a policy which we define in this thing called an application network profile. We set policy for that workload. And what happens, we drop that policy into the network, and the network, using telemetry, tells the controller whether you're in policy or not. So you drop it into the network, and you can see multi-hypervisor, multi-vendor. Now what happens, we've got visibility to what's going on. And because we've got visibility to what's going on and we know what the policy is, we can tell whether we're in policy. That's okay, that truck keeps going, that's cool. What happens when we go out of policy? What happens now that we've got clouds and we can move workloads around? We can hybrid cloud. Well, with that policy, we can say, if you're out of policy, bang, we better move that workload. Automatically, no human intervention, that workload gets moved to another data center, to your other cloud, to a public cloud, maybe from a public cloud back again, maintaining policy. So the new wave going forward in applications is defining the policy for the workload that includes everything to do with running that application. I'm moving through this pretty quickly, I know, but I'm just giving you some headline issues as to where we're moving. Workspace. So a lot of people in this room are responsible, believe it or not, for the workspace because, take a look, our workspace has changed. And the buildings that you and I work in were built for the way we worked 30 years ago. But I spend half my time on the road. A truckie's office is the truck. And how many of you work from home? I'm sure all of you. And yet those offices are designed the way we used to work 30 years ago. So what is happening, and there's a massive transformation going on right here in Australia, is we're looking at transforming the workspace. And as Gilbert Rhodes says, and he's from Herman Miller, famous furniture and internal architect, the most important thing in the room is not the furniture, it's the people. And for those of you familiar with ABW, activity-based workspace, it's about allocating the workspace based on the job to be done versus the role. So just because you're a senior vice president doesn't mean you get this massive office. But if you're a senior vice president and you've got a big job to be doing, yeah, you can have it. But so can anybody else have and reallocate that workspace. So that's a big deal. And again, I'm not going to demonstrate this here, but you can go online, go workspace, cisco.com, go workspace, and there's some good animations there that can help you explain to people outside of IT what different meeting rooms can do, what you can do with the technology, how you can have virtual meetings, and how easy it is to set up. Which leads me to the next point. This is what most of you have got on your desk. Lots of phones and cameras and speakers and screens and so on. Gone. One screen looks like a big iPad, and it does everything. Everything you want, from acting as your second screen, to full telepresence, to a telephone, to all your contacts getting automatically loaded, all touch screen, connected to the network, enabling you to have meetings very easily, very transparently. Keyword, simple. One of the biggest impediments to leveraging the technology that we and other people have been selling is the complexity of it. And that's what we've been spending the last 2 years on. Make it simple. Give you an example. Collaboration meeting rooms. We want to have meetings. But often we can't fly there, or we can't physically be there. So how easy is it to set up a meeting? And you know, it was interesting. I had an EA who left about 6 months ago, so I had to think about, what does she actually do? Like, you know, in terms of her job for me. And a lot of the time I found was just setting up meetings. Because I have a lot of meetings with people. It's easy in Australia, but when you've got virtual meetings around the world, you know, it's 6 a.m. in Singapore, it's 8 a.m. here, it's 11 p.m. in London. And when one person pulls out, you know, the whole bit. We can now do this really, really simple. One click, you set up a bridge, you then email that to everybody, whoever you want to, and literally you can set up a meeting with 500 people in less than, I was going to say 60 seconds. And the recipients can get on via basic telephone, they can get on an iPad, they can get on a full-fledged telepresence room, it doesn't matter. Simple. That's the key. Here's an example. Join. This is now, I've got the email and I want to join. I can join the meeting from an email, click a button. I can join from a browser, I'm on my phone, click a button. I can go to the touchscreen, click a button. One touch, connect to the meeting. Really powerful when we talk about collaboration, and collaboration not only within the company, but outside the company. Security. Do you know you have been hit? Now, I'm going to ask you a question. This is it. Cisco manages a lot of companies around the world, thousands of them, under contract. So this is where I get this information from. And I ask people the question, if you knew you were going to be compromised, would you do things differently? And the answer is absolutely yes. And in fact, I think I got the slide out of order. The question I was going to ask, and I think it's on the next slide, is how many of you think or know, or what percentage of companies that we know and run and manage do you think is getting hit? What percentage? And because we've got a big audience, I'll tell you, 100%. All of our customers are getting hit as we speak, and in fact, it's only getting worse. What this graph shows, Melissa Hathaway is an advisor to the US government, Obama and Bush before that. She was out here not so long ago. And here's a key point. She said, you know, most governments look at GDP, looking at these positive metrics on your left-hand side, KPIs. But she says, if you account for cyber attacks, you better drop 1 or 2 points off your GDP. That's how serious it is. So you can see the Netherlands, they're going negative GDP on this graph. The US, well, 1.2% GDP. Australia, let's say we've got a 3% GDP. We're now, in realistic terms, probably under 1% GDP. So it's having that much impact on economies. I think Snowden has had a really serious impact on governments, and it's absolutely having an impact on corporations as we speak. So it's pretty serious. There's the question. Percentage of organizations with traffic going to sites with malware. It's 100%. And the problem is getting worse because of what's going on in our industry. First of all, changing business models. The fact that you can use hybrid cloud, the fact that you can use your credit card and get things done outside of the governance of IT is causing all sorts of issues for companies. The threat landscape has really gone exponentially worse in terms of the complexity and the advanced persistent threats changing and the types of attacks changing and keeping track of that changing. And finally, the fact that, you know, there's so many vectors that can now hit you. How do you keep up with it? And again, there's a role for IT here, clearly. And Cisco's very simple, I guess, strategy is before the attack, make sure you've, you know, secured yourself as much as you can. During the attack, How do you detect you're being attacked? And it's no good finding out 3 weeks or 3 months later because the remediation is bad. And finally, what do you do after the attack? So now you've been affected, how do you clean it up? And again, that's our whole strategy. There's a whole, I'm not here to talk about products, but you'll see a whole bunch of products underneath that where we're actually using, and I'm going to talk about it just now, big data and predictive analytics in the right-hand side today. So not only do you know you've been hit, but we're starting to now help you predict before you get hit. The Internet of Everything now, I know a lot, I've been on radio and whatever on this a lot and talk about the Internet of Everything, and my daughter said, "Dad, please stop using that term. It sounds very fluffy," and I sort of tend to agree with her. However, it's deadly serious, and I hope that in the next couple minutes I can share with you why it's so serious and why I think you guys have got a very important role to play in what I'm about to talk about. Because the value at stake is significant, and I'll give you a number. We've done research on this. The next 10 years, globally, we believe that there's $19 trillion at stake in public and private sector around the world if we can leverage technology. That's our number. You might say, oh, trillions of dollars, who can comprehend that? Well, I'll tell you what, McKinsey's talking 25 trillion. And others like Qualcomm and Intel are talking in the trillions. It's a big number. So what do we mean by that? The fundamental thesis is this. There are 7 billion people on Earth today. 7 billion of us. But there's about 10 billion things connected to the internet today, rising to 50 billion things connected by 2020. And here's the point. Humans are not going to be able to manage 50 billion things. Machines are going to have to do that. Machines are going to have to operate those 53 trucks in Rio and the trains because we can't do it in real time ourselves. So that's the fundamental thesis behind IoE. But before I talk about our view of life, this comes from GE, straight out of their white paper on the industrial internet. And what GE is saying is, and I mentioned Jeff Immelt earlier, we're going to instrument everything. And the first thing, anytime you hear Jeff Immelt talk, he'll talk about our aim is to provide our customers with zero unscheduled downtime. That's his aim. How does he do that? You're sitting on a jumbo. The engines are on your right and on your left. GE is instrumenting all of those engines. In other words, he's putting sensors and intelligence into those. He's connecting them via fiber and beaming lots and lots of data down to a data center in the US. And in real time, it's going back to the engines. And it's in real time telling the engine how to optimize spin, how to optimize airflow, how to maximize the use of the gas going through it. And that's being done in real time, no human being. So we're moving to a world of what I call open circuit or open loop to closed loop. Open loop is when a human being's involved, but we're moving to a world of no human beings being involved. It's automation. Automation requires application. So again, the part I was talking about with applications and policy becomes fundamental as we move forward. Now, what happens when that computer in the US determines part 74 on engine 3 will threshold in 36 hours. This plane's in flight, it's going to land in Singapore. It sends a trouble ticket to Singapore to the technician to say, part, whatever it is, needs to be fixed on engine 3. That's when we go to open loop. It's the exception rather than the rule. Today, it's the other way around. But that's the world that we're moving to. That's the world that you have to lead your companies to, because we're moving to a world of automation. And now I said I'd talk about what Cisco's doing. We started life about, 8 years ago in IoT, and done a lot of work on standards and technologies like fog, computing, etc. But we realized a couple of years ago, it's not just about things. It's about those things producing lots of data, changing process, and impacting people. So our view on IoE is this. But now, if you marry that with what GE is saying, it's exactly the same. Those engines producing lots of data, enabling processes, and using people as the exception. And we're seeing massive transformation ability because of this. Here's an example. Did you know that in the US, every year, because people don't take their medication, it costs $290 billion a year. That's not counting the people who actually die. $290 billion. A little company called Protheus in the UK developed a little piece of silicon to put in a pill. And when you ingest the pill, the silicon dissolves, and you put a little patch on your skin. The silicon, when it dissolves, chirps to the patch, which talks to your phone, which sends a message to your healthcare provider, your doctor, your nurse, whatever it is. And as long as they keep getting those chirps, they don't call you. If they don't get the chirp, excuse me, Mrs. Huddleston, you haven't taken your pills. $290 billion under that curve. One teeny little example. We're using a lot of the stuff that I've just been talking about to make some dramatic impact in healthcare. But we can talk about mining, we can talk about agriculture, and that's where the value at stake, the $19 trillion that I was referring to earlier, comes from. Next. And this is a big one. Predictive analytics. An organization that doesn't leverage its data is like a person with a photographic memory who never bothers to think. And that's why I believe this whole notion of big data is a real sort of furphy misnomer, misguided, whatever. Because this is what it's really about. Any of you guys seen this movie, Moneyball? Fantastic movie. Baseball team in the US, losing. No more money. And they're sitting there saying, what are we going to do? Brad, he's the coach, meets this guy, he's a kid out of uni, really smart mathematician. Kid says to Brad, you're looking in the wrong place. You're looking in the wrong place. Because most teams pick people on how famous they are, how much money they're getting paid, sometimes how many home runs or how, strikes they've made and so on. Basically, he's saying it's about bringing it down to one number. He took data. He didn't take names. He took data from every player in North America. And he crunched that data down, and his selection was based on the data. We need to change the way we think. Let me bear with me for a moment. When all of us went to school, we were taught what's called causal thinking. Ask why. Why is this so? Why did this happen? I would suggest to you we're moving to a very different world where it's not about why, it's about what. And here's an example. You're in your car. You normally go the blue route, but your car tells you it's going to take you 45 minutes longer to get to work. Are you going to sit down and argue with the car, or are you going to just get in the car and go the red route? You're going to go the red route. Likewise, your defib tells your phone that you better go to the doctor because in 22 days something's going to happen. Are you going to argue with your phone? No, you're going to go to the doctor. We're moving to a world of that. It's not about why, just do it. We're correlating data much more than your brain can correlate, and we now need to think differently. A vineyard. If I said to you, there's a vineyard, we're trying to monitor this vineyard, the humidity, the temperature, etc. Well, first point is, that sensor better be damn reliable, because if that fails, I don't see the vineyard. Secondly, let's say there's a disease on that one little vine in the front. Do you have to spray the whole vineyard? No. What if, on the other hand, we start being a little bit more Internet of Everything centric? We put thousands of sensors across the entire vineyard. Things start changing now because we're getting lots more data. 300 sensors go down, so what? We can pinpoint which vine has got which disease on it. We can be much smarter about things, right? To make the point, I want to share with you a little story. This guy was at the 2012 Predictive Analytics World Conference. He's got a glass jar, and he's saying to all of the people at the conference, guess how many dollar notes there are in the glass jar? The right answer, 362. The best answer was $10 off it. $10 off it. But here's the thing. Using the ensemble principle, he averaged all of the entries. That's what he got. The ensemble principle is very simple. Predictions can be improved by averaging the predictions of many. Now we start thinking going forward, and where you guys need to start thinking going forward is, what do you do if we've got tens of thousands of sensors? What do you do if we've got millions of sensors? All of us are sensors. All your smartphones are sensors. We now have to bring that data back, and we need to think of two two, I guess, objectives. One is how do we enable the human to make better decisions? And secondly, how do we enable automation to enable those trucks to run without any people involved? That's where we're moving towards. And I can tell you a lot of people outside of IT don't get this. They don't know what's possible. Technically, we can do this today. It's happening today. But it's going to get bigger and bigger. And when you ask people outside of IT, what's important about IT, I can tell you it's not about the device, it's not about the network or the fog or the architecture or the packets. It's about the outcome. It's about the outcome. Can you help me make a smarter, faster decision? Or can you automate my process? It's about those two things. That's the world we're moving towards. And if we're going to move towards that, we've got to start thinking differently. We've got to think differently. Banking is essential to the modern economy, banks are not. That's where I started. It's absolutely critical that you guys play a role, but not in the way you did the last 30 years. You play a role in terms of what your customers, your organizations need going forward. Thinking differently. Because here's the thesis, and that is 99% of the world is not connected. Think about what the opportunities are if we do get connected. Thanks very much. Enjoy the rest of the show.